morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Rethink Culture, the podcast that shines a spotlight on leaders of businesses that people love to work for. My name is Andreas Constantinou, and I'm your host. I'm the founder of Rethink Culture, a company that helps businesses create happier, healthier workplace cultures by auditing their culture. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Nathan Donaldson, all the way from New Zealand. He's the CEO and founder of Boost. Boost is a custom software agency for government. He's also the author of a very nicely titled book, Unicorns Over Rainbows, which is a book about making lasting, meaningful changes to your organization. He is a winner of a Lifetime Achievement Award for Democracy in the Workplace from WorldBlu. He's a designer at heart, loves to solve hard problems. He also loves computer game racing, he tells me. And of course, being in New Zealand, all about outdoors, mountain biking, surfing, snowboarding, and everything else. So very welcome to the Rethink Culture podcast, Nathan. Really pleased to have you here.
Thanks very much, Andreas. Very pleased to be here.
So as we get started, tell us a bit about what is Boost and what makes Boost special in terms of its culture.
Sure. So Boost, as you mentioned, is a software company. We make custom or bespoke software for government departments. We're quite small. There's about 25 to 30 of us. And I think what is unique is, well, not unique, but what's uncommon is that we don't have any hierarchical structures built into the business. So we don't have any managers, line managers. Everybody has a coach. So, and I think it's really easy sometimes to say there's no managers in this business. And then when you start to dig down, you find that there's all sorts of management going on. But really what we have is a group of people who are able to manage themselves and have very high levels of responsibility. So when we use the Gallup or now Clifton's Strengths Finder, and I would say 90% of our team have responsibility as one of their top 10 strengths. So they feel responsible to each other, to the client and to the wider organization. And they know how to make good decisions for themselves. The way we got here was really about standing on the shoulders of giants, reading the best books out there that describe the types of cultures that I really wanted to be a part of. So I'm thinking about, say, Richard Sheridan's book, Joy Inc., or Maverick by Ricardo Semler. And when I read those, they really sparked my imagination to think, well, what can the business be like? And often we've just copied stuff and then made it work for us. And always it's been a huge improvement. So as I look around the business today, everybody's managing themselves, but everybody has the support and the coaching to really, be their best selves. We encourage people to bring their whole selves to work, and we involve the whole team in decision making. Perhaps another thing that's a wee bit different about Boost is the way the leadership team is structured. So we don't describe ourselves as the leadership team. We're the navigators. Our job is to help chart the course again that's going to get the company to the destination that we will want to get to. And that group is not made up of department heads or people who have been there the longest or people on the highest salaries. It's taken from right across the business. And it's based on people's ability to move the business forward and their desire to provide a service to the rest of the organization and to other people. So at times we've invited people onto that navigators team, the leadership team, when they've joined as the office administrator and they've been with us for 2 or 3 weeks. And you can just see they're exactly the right person to be leading the organization forward. So we always try to keep it at least 50% female. The evidence that having more than 50% female in teams makes better decision making is very, very strong. So And the age ranges in the leadership team at the moment, the navigators, goes from 24 through to me, the oldest, 52. And so we've got currently 3 women, 3 men, people with diverse ethnic background, cultural background, and they're just committed to making the organisation the best place to work possible while delivering the best results for our clients. So I always think it's really key that you can't be productive unless your team's happy, and your team can't be happy unless they're productive. So it's not one or the other. It's not those surface feature type happiness things. It's not the foosball tables and the perks. It's that deeper happiness that comes from doing some meaningful work for people that you like and respect, working with people that you like and respect. So we're always trying to balance that, the needs of the collective against the needs of the individual, keeping our mind on what the team needs, but also on what the organisation and the clients need. The business is 24 years old this year. So our youngest member of our leadership team is almost exactly the same age as the business. So there's quite a few funny touch points that that we miss out on together, which is fun.
And talking about government clients who are, of course, imagine extremely hierarchical, does that create any tension? Is there any gap in expectations from your clients on how, who should be signing off and having an official like head of procurement? And, is there, what tension is there and how do you manage it?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I suppose the way we look at it is that we have created the systems and processes for being able to deliver high quality software at high value quite quickly. And if our clients are unable to work in the way that we need to work, we can't deliver that. So when we're going through sort of procurement processes, we're being really careful to make sure that the client's able to provide everything that we need to be successful. Mm-hmm. And that includes having, a single person who can make the decisions on what we're doing and who is available at least 20 hours a week to the team. So our strong preference is to have our clients in constant contact with the team, so working in the team, because that's the main limiting factor for productivity, is access to that person who can make decisions. The downside of this is that our addressable market is quite small. So we just can't work for everyone, because we have a way to be successful and we don't know any other way to be successful. So if we can't work that way, we just don't take on the work. So we get a new client every 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
Which is a terrible sales cycle. But we build very long-lasting, trusting relationships with those clients. So our longest project's been going continuously for over 15 years. So we're an agile software development company. We work in 2-week sprints, and that project's been running 2-week sprints every 2 weeks, apart from Christmas, for the last 15 years.
Amazing. And what got you to this journey? What was your thought process like? Why did you want to build a company with no managers? It's a very unusual, as you said, uncommon setup. And what do you think in the way you grew up and your worldview as a younger person, as a younger Nathan, what influenced you to go that way?
Now, that's a really interesting question. So I think the first time I started to become politically aware, I was 7 or 8. So in the town where I'm living now, where I grew up, Dunedin, at the bottom of New Zealand, we have a beautiful harbour. And at the head of the harbour, there's a wetland on one side and a royal albatross colony on the other. So it's the only southern royal albatross colony on a mainland in the world. And when I was 7 or 8, the government wanted to put an aluminium smelter on the wetland at the head of the harbour. and it divided the town. So it's quite a small town. It would have been about 80,000 people then, but it absolutely divided the town. And I found myself on one side of the argument against the smelter, with my parents quite firmly on the other side. And that was the start of political and social justice arguments that continue with my parents to this day. So I've never really felt a strong drive to agree for the sake of sort of social harmony. I've always liked to think about things from a relatively, I hope, long-term perspective and form my own opinions, which made being a teenager a bit tough. So that was the kind of start of, I suppose, my critical thinking journey, like thinking independently, making decisions for myself. The journey into business, I'd never really aspired to being a business person. What I'd aspired to do was to make change in the world and to do really good work. And when I was at university, the internet was just coming of age. So I was at university from 1990, onwards, and the university in Dunedin had just got internet. And so for those old enough to remember, we didn't have the World Wide Web at that stage. It started kind of a year or two later, but we had Gopher and Usenet and the FTP servers and stuff. And I was fascinated by that access to information, and that drove me to look for a job where I could start to interact with that sort of large network of the internet. I worked a few places. I did some teaching, and I ended up in Wellington, in our capital city, and decided to start a company with a friend because I could see so much opportunity to do things better, but with a deeper understanding and deliver better results for people. And I wanted to start a company to do that work. And I never really engaged with the business side of it until I was maybe 3 or 4 years in. And I started to realize that running a business actually threw up many more intellectual challenges for me than doing the software development work. By that stage, I've been doing the software development stuff for 10, 12 years. And I started to realize that the complexity and subtlety of working with people running a business was actually incredibly intellectually stimulating. And I started to think about, what that might look like. After 6 years, I bought out my business partner I'd started with, and it was just myself. And that was one of the things that gave me the opportunity to really start experimenting. So, we were 50-50 shareholders and we worked really well together. But once I owned the whole business, it was really my playground to try new ideas and to try things and to see what effect I could have on the outcomes. But at that stage, I still really hadn't engaged with sort of business thought at all. I still sort of saw business as a bit of a dirty word, I suppose. I didn't see it as caring, humanistic. I saw it as one-dimensional, and I didn't aspire to be, an old white guy in a suit standing at the front of a company barking orders at people. So ironically now I'm, an old white guy with long hair sitting at the back of the room being unhelpful. But I was trying to make it work, but without really engaging with the ideas of business. And then one day we had a call from our largest client who said, the work's stopping, essentially. We're going from, being sort of a very large percentage of your work to, I can keep one person on this project, keep the lights on, and I'm going to go out and try and find some more work. And so the next day I had to come to work. I had to make 5 people redundant. I had to talk to the team about what was going on. And I remember my wife still refers to it as the personal financial crisis. So it was during the GFC, the global financial crisis, that we were doing our own personal financial crisis. And it was traumatic. We'd gone from I'd gone from having a business that the money just seemed to come in. The team judged how well we were doing by how many packages would fill up on my desk, the things I was buying online. And then all of a sudden, I was struggling to find money to pay wages, struggling to see more than a month out. And it really woke me up to the realization that I was just a huge bottleneck in the business, that, I was the only person I could change, and that my lack of knowledge, skills and understanding and leadership and business was a huge risk to the business. And I'd failed everybody around me, which, that just really sucked as well, that I'd aspired to be a good leader, but I'd really not delivered on it. So I started to read books. I started to get coaches, and I joined a couple of organizations that were really formative. So first I joined WorldBlu, worked with Tracy at WorldBlu. She coached me for 3 or 4 years through some particularly tough stuff. And then I joined EO, the entrepreneurs organization, around, so I joined EO about the same time this all kicked off, actually. So I started to look at EO for the idea of having some support in the business. But really, once this crisis occurred and I realized I needed to really level up, EO became a great support, largely in terms of exposing me to some amazing people, amazing ideas, and just, lists and lists of books to go away and read. And so that's what I did. And in those first few years, I struggled to find a model that worked for me. So I was looking around at the business world around me, and I was trying to discern what's the best model, what's the most successful model for building the type of business that I want to build. And so, the thing that was most obvious was sort of that corporate hierarchical model. Mm-hmm. And so, we started doing 360 reviews, and I started trying to put in hierarchical systems. And even though the culture we had then isn't like the culture we had now, it was still really a reflection of who I was, which is someone who was anti-authoritarian, didn't like to do things the way other people did them just for the pure reason of doing that. And so it was never going to work. And of course it didn't. And so it wasn't until I was reading books like Maverick by Ricardo Semler that was absolutely seminal for me. That I remember it being so eye-opening that he could do things that were the right thing to do for people, and they were successful. And that was just so exciting. And then, going on to read other books and meet other people, Richard Sheridan at Menlo Innovations, who wrote Joy Inc., taken an incredible amount from him. And really what we started to do was just implement one thing after another, one small change, get that embedded and working, and then try the next thing. And I always think you've kind of got two options in the life you lead, whether it be your personal life or your business life. You can be intentional, or you can just be ad hoc. And I'd rather be intentional and get it wrong, and at least I knew what I was trying to achieve, and then I can reset course and try again, than just to let things happen to me and just to see what evolved. And so I began to take a really intentional view of designing the business. So, and it's taken a long time. We're just a small business, but I think, the joke we have at work is that I come up with an idea, and then 3 years later, the team decides that it's a good idea and starts to implement it. So pretty much everything's on a 3-year delay cycle for us, I think.
That's because the organization is not ready to adopt it, or because they're challenging your own views? Why is that?
I think there's a couple of things. In the early days, it was because I had way too many ideas, way too poorly thought through. I would move to a new idea before I'd even finished half implementing the first one. And so the fatigue of that pressure that I put on the team of, just idea after idea after idea. And, they just, I think, got to the point where it was like, Nathan's been to a conference. He's going to come back with lots of ideas. let's just like nod and smile for a while and hope he forgets about it. That was kind of the vibe. And then over the years, as I've kind of, I hope, got a bit more wisdom and slowed stuff down, listened more, said less, the team have started to be interested in my ideas, but also I've started to have far fewer ideas. So now I think what tends to happen is if I notice something or an opportunity, it becomes the start of a conversation. Look, I've noticed this. Is this something that you think we can do better? What do you guys think might be something we could try? So realizing that I didn't have to have all the ideas, and that frankly some of my ideas were terrible, bringing a bit of humility to the table really helped, I think.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with that. My team used to also say, "Oh, Andres has read another book," and there were a few ideas on the table, and of course I would forget them a month or two later, and then maybe 6 months later would come back and say, "What happened to that?" As if somebody should have taken my brain dump at the moment and executed it because it was the best thing. Of course, it wasn't, and I also realized I was coming into meetings and voicing those ideas, and then people over the course of the meeting were shooting some of them down, and then I decided maybe I should be the last one to speak because the people working here are far smarter than me, and I think there's entrepreneurs, we have very similar traits. I think a lot of us have attention deficit. I certainly have it, and having lots of ideas, I think, is a hallmark of that. And like being creative and throwing in the next silver bullet that's going to change the world. Which leads me to something else we were discussing before the show, and coming to your book. It's a nice segue to your book, which is Unicorns Over Rainbows. And in your book, you talk about small changes. So not these big ideas that are going to change the world, but small changes done, I think, which the word percolate comes to mind. So small ideas that percolate or simmer or marinate slowly and have lasting changes to the culture. So tell us more about that good small change framework.
Yeah, so the way the good small change framework came about was I've got so much from so many people. So, Patrick Lencioni, Ricardo Semler, all of their books have been so impactful for me. And I wanted to give something back to the business community. But when I sat down to look at what we'd done in the business, and I with my leadership team, I wrote a list of all the things that we'd done. And so it was, all sorts of changes. There was, some of it was process, some of it was frameworks, but there was a lot of thinking tools and ideas in there as well. We ended up with a list of somewhere between 45 and 50 different changes we'd made. And as we went through each one of them, I realized they'd all come from somewhere else. So, this one was from this book, this one was from this seminar.
What's an example?
And I sat there.
What's an example?
So the ideal team player, which is from one of Patrick Lencioni's books. He has a really nice model for identifying people who are going to work well in a collaborative culture. So you're looking for people who are humble, hungry, and smart. So a really simple idea, a really lovely book. Patrick's books have been inspiration for how I wrote my book as well as writing it. But so humble, hungry, smart, the ideal team player would be a really good example. And as we went through this list, I got quite despondent. I was thinking, well, actually, I haven't done anything. There's nothing of value that I can share with the world. All I've done is taken other people's ideas. And it was that moment of voicing that self-doubt and being vulnerable with my team that they
they said, well, isn't what you've done implemented these changes well? You've been able to implement 45 to 50 changes over the last 6 years that have moved the business forward tremendously. Is that something that you could help people with? And as I started to think more and more about it, I thought about some of the people that I know who have struggled with this stuff, and they've read all the books, but they don't seem to be able to make any of the changes. And so I spent a couple of months with my team working backwards through discovering what the process was that we used to make change in the business. And I came up with a small framework, the Good Small Change framework, which is, it's 3 parts. So a nice Venn diagram. You've got curiosity, accessibility, and safety. So curiosity, so you have to be curious, you have to inspire your team to be curious. Accessibility, the ideas have to be easy to understand and easy to transmit throughout the organization. And then safety, you have to create a safe to fail environment. Without a safe to fail environment, no one's going to take the risk to try and implement these ideas. And all of these things drive the change down to be smaller and smaller. So the smaller the change is, the safer the environment is to try it in, because if you can get the change small enough, then if it doesn't work, it just feels like learning. It doesn't feel catastrophic. If it's small enough, then you're not betting the farm. You're not sitting in front of your team saying, if we don't make this change, the whole business is going to fail. Those things I've done just paralyze people. They're too scared to try, because if they try and fail, then the business failing is on them. So safety drives the size of the change down. Accessibility, making the change easy to understand, also drives the size down. And curiosity, I think people are much more curious about what one small thing will do for the business than a large change that they just struggle to see their part in. There is kind of a 4th part that underlies the framework, and that's empathy. So none of this works without empathy. You have to be able to feel how your team's feeling about the change, if for no other reason than to have the rate of change at the right and sustainable level for them. One of the stories that I tell in the book, and when I'm unpacking the model, so the book has 2 parts. It's got a fable at the start, and then a description of the model. And the book's very small. I've noticed over the years that people really love getting small books. They don't like getting big books.
Absolutely.
So I always set out to write a small book. And so one of the stories I tell is about how I developed my empathy. As I was saying earlier, we used the Clifton Strengths Finder with our team. And when I originally did it, empathy was right down the bottom for me. So it was like number 34 out of 34. My empathy was so poor that my sister once told me that I was a cold, heartless robot. And my empathy was so poor that didn't even bother me at the time. But over the years, I realized that my lack of empathy was holding me back as a leader, like really holding me back. Just catastrophically holding me back. And so I worked really hard to improve my empathy. And the way I did that was to bring people onto my leadership team, onto the navigators, who were very, very empathetic. And then just shutting up a lot more, so that when something came up, letting them tell me how other people were feeling, letting them tell me what was going on, and learning from them how to be empathetic. And so I originally took Clifton Strengths Finder 2016. I took it again in September last year, and my empathy had gone from the bottom to number 9. So
wow.
Not quite the top, but I'll take it.
That is a huge change. Knowing the framework and having done it a few times myself, I know it's an enormous change. Yeah, go ahead.
And I wasn't really happy to just take the data, because I think, there can be a feeling sometimes like, is the numbers change, but is this reflected in who I am as a person to the people around me? And so the way I went and validated that was going out and talking to the people who had worked with me for a long time and just asking them, did they remember what it was like when they first started working with me? How have I changed? Like, what's different now? And the number one thing that people said was that I was just way calmer. Like I just had a calmness that I'd never had before. Before I was frenetic and crazy and talking and no space for anyone else. And now what they have is the space that they can inhabit in the business, that they can bring themselves to, that I'm enabling, I think, or helping enable. And so they find me much more fun to work with. They find me much more thoughtful, and that's why they've stayed in the business. So empathy sort of underlines the whole framework, really. It's really important. And I think the reason I tell that story is because I certainly felt, 6 or 7 years ago that my empathy was where it was, and that was it. And there was, that's just who I was, and I didn't have an opportunity to change it. And I just want to share with people that, if they do want to change it, and I highly recommend they do, that it's a journey worth going on in it, and it does work.
I think I can also relate to that. Years ago, I had done a very bad fire. It was someone who I knew wasn't growing with the business and wasn't a good fit to the values. And the values were becoming much more clear, crystal clear to me. And I was seeing the discrepancy. And so I knew that, that person got us a long way, but they weren't gonna, take us beyond that. What got you here won't got you there. Like Marshall, is it Marshall Goldsmith? Is that name? I forget. So I couldn't face up to the truth. I couldn't have a difficult conversation with them. And I completely mishandled that fire. So, of course, that person went later on and gave us a 1-star rating on Glassdoor, which was like an alarm bell. And at that point,
Yep.
I had also joined Entrepreneurs Organization EO, and was also started reading like you and becoming much more conscious about systems and processes and how to properly run a business. And I almost, maybe unawares, went into a mission of improving the culture. And I also came from a state of, or a status of very low empathy. And I was, the idea person coming up with framework after framework and thinking, oh, we should do this and we should do that. And my HR person, Sarah, she was the counterbalance. She has extreme empathy. She's in a sense, the psychologist who's there to listen to people and really connect with them and understand how they feel and how these changes might affect them. So she was really pushing me back, and that helped me greatly in understand how to marry these two elements, which is the engineering systems element, which is, everything in boxes and everything in rhythms and everything kind of in Venn diagrams, let's say. And then there's the empathy part, which is the messiness of how our brains work and how we are imperfect, but also perfect in our imperfections. And how what seems like a logical performance review scheme or an incentive scheme or a bonus scheme or whatever might very easily backfire if you really understand how people feel and how they would welcome or not welcome that change. So for me, I learned, thanks to this, to Sarah, the partner that I had, that we went through this journey together in improving culture. And over time, we got it to 4.6 stars, which has been for a few years now.
Awesome.
I wasn't brave enough and to take it further. and actually only started reading about self-managed organizations after having transitioned the business to another CEO. And so now, I don't run the business. I just help her be the best CEO she can be, and keep my ideas to myself about progressive cultures. So back to you, Nathan. What's one of the hard things in running a self-managed business that challenged you?
That's a really good question. I think trying to balance the needs of the business, my personal needs as the owner of the business, and the needs of the people, and finding that balance in a way that's fair. I think it's a constant tightrope to walk. As I've stepped further and further back, purposely to create some spaces for other people to step into, it can be quite easy to feel like you're not adding as much value to the business anymore. And for me, that can be quite hard. The business still provides the livelihood for myself and my family, and I want to be delivering value. And so to sometimes be saying, no, I'm not going to do that, because if I do that, no one else has got a chance to step up, and leaving a gap, a very obvious gap in capability and capacity in the business, and have that affect the business, but force a change. I found that quite hard, but time and time again, it's been valuable. I would say, as an example of that, our sales process, our sales cycles are incredibly long, and I stopped doing sales probably 12 years ago. And for businesses like ours, 25 to 30 people, a fairly contained market, the CEO or the founder is usually the best salesperson. It's just,
Right.
It's just kind of how it is. And so my conscious decision not to do sales had a real impact on the business. But I knew that if I continued to do sales, there would be no way to build a highly effective sales team.
Right.
And especially a sales team that of the kind that I wanted. So I stepped out of sales, and then it's taken more than 10 years to build an effective sales function in the business. And that's a long time to have a key part of the business underperforming.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of the people in the business. It was just we just didn't know how to do it.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. I tried, I think, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people to replace me as founder and effectively head of sales in maybe for a long time, historically. And I thought that sales is something you just hand over and the other person takes over. And, they have this secret telepathy to me, knowing exactly how I think about customers and sales, and that they can just listen to a few words coming out of my mouth and pick it up. And that's why so many people failed, because I was assuming too much. I was not guiding them. And eventually what did work was doing the hard work and documenting all the sales process and all the pricing and all the variants and products, and, customer personas and profiles and, the scripts that you used to call and speak to clients. And it's just process. And after a big part of that process was done, then, the next person came in, who's now our CEO. She came from the sales team, and she really took over the sales team and did a very good job. So another question I wanted to ask you is, you also strike me as someone who's very calm, and you have this serenity to you. this stoicism. How does living in New Zealand, especially you live in a seaside town, right? How does that affect the culture you've built and how you see the world and how you see the person you want to be?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm in Dunedin, and this is where I was born and grew up. And Dunedin was settled by the Scottish, largely Scottish Presbyterians. And, Mark Twain visited Dunedin and he said the Scots were on their way to heaven and they came to Dunedin and they stopped and didn't go any further because they thought they'd found paradise. So my whole childhood has been informed by the culture of the Scots. And, my grandfather came from Glasgow during the Depression, just him and his sisters. My great-grandparents came and farmed in New Zealand in the late 1800s. And this was a very tough place to come. They'd jump on a boat and it would be 6 weeks to 3 months to get to New Zealand. And they'd been sold New Zealand based on some paintings. And when they got here, it wasn't necessarily what was promised. But the Scottish sort of stoicism, you just make it work. Yeah, there's not a lot of space in life for complaining. It's very egalitarian. So no one's better than anyone else. Sometimes the American sort of putting yourself out there and being, confident, it's very antithetical to us over here. We're taught to keep our head down, be humble, and do the work. So, you're valuable as long as you're working hard. That's what it's all about. It's how hard you work. But at the same time, there's a warmth down here, and everybody's got time to chat. So, the reason I came back to Dunedin, so we arrived back here 4 years ago after living overseas a wee bit and working in Wellington. And what I missed about Dunedin was that people just aren't really that into their jobs. Like, work's important and they want to do a good job, but they never are too busy to stop and have a 15-minute chat. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Like the guys who deliver the gas bottles, if you're out there, they'll stop for a chat. If you're in a cafe and a waitress is serving you and you strike up a conversation, they'll stop for a chat. And so that idea that, working was important, and, the Presbyterian work ethic or the Protestant work ethic's all about, that's where your value comes from. But relationships are super important as well. And that's what I've taken through, I think, to the business. Our core focus is relationships. The relationships with each other, the relationships with our clients. And every decision we make is through the lens of how does this improve the relationship? The business itself is about 50% people who were born in New Zealand and 50% new New Zealanders. So, looking around the room, there's Lynn's from Myanmar, Changyel's from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, Clarissa's from the Philippines, Gus is from Brazil, and on and on. And so there's this international multicultural cast, but they all have one thing in common, and that is their ability to be warm with everybody, their ability to make people feel like they're the most important person in the room, and how much value they derive from having high quality relationships in their life. So, it's often not till you get quite a bit older that you're able to go back and pick out those threads from your childhood to see how they've informed you. And it's only in the last few years that I've really started to think about this stuff. I've always struggled with the Protestant work ethic of, unless you're working like right at the moment, you're not doing anything valuable, because I think so much of the value that I feel like I bring to an organization is thinking, and not even necessarily consciously thinking, maybe letting my unconscious mind dwell on some problems for a couple of weeks. And to the outside world, that can sometimes look like not doing very much at all.
Yeah, I really value this relationships above, or at least on an equal footing to work, to output, to productivity that you say. It's, in my mind, an ethic that has been lost in the last few decades as we talk about, productivity and doing more and technology, and we can be, much faster, cheaper, better versions of our older selves. And we forget that humanity, relationships, empathy, connection is what makes us human. It's not the work itself, and it's what unites us. And recently in EO, I've heard this phrase, connection before content. So before you talk about anything work related, you need to establish a basic connection within the people you're working with. And now when I go into a meeting and we start just talking about work, it seems so forceful and inauthentic. And that, we all have good days or bad days, but unless we talk about a little bit about ourselves and how we are and how we're feeling at that moment, I think that the rest of the conversation is so dry and lacks meaning to a great extent. So with that, Nathan, I want to thank you for being part of this this podcast. I am humbly learning from you and learning from your stoicism and your balance between relationships and work and output. Is there somewhere where people can find out more about you? Again, your book is Unicorns Over Rainbows. I guess.
So this is what the book looks like. If people want to try and find it, it's of course, when you type Unicorns Over Rainbows in Amazon, you get lots of kids' picture books. So it's not the world's best title. And I have a website, nathandonaldson.com. One thing people may notice is that I just don't really like to talk about myself very much. So the website's not really that great in terms of finding out stuff. But I love talking to people and making connections. So I'd love for people to reach out to me, to have conversations. I love to jump on Zoom and talk. And isn't it amazing that you're in Athens, I'm in Dunedin, we're on completely the opposite sides of the world, and we're able to do this. And so I really want to make businesses better places for people to work in. So if you're someone who's on that journey and wants to have a chat, then get in touch.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for your generosity and being generous with your time as well. And thank you to all of those who listen to us. If you like the show, you can support us by telling your friends about it, or you can leave a comment in your favorite podcast app. You can also watch us if you're just listening to us right now. You can go to YouTube, and the channel is @Rethink Culture. So youtube.com/@Rethink Culture. And keep leading, as I like to say, keep creating happier workplaces for you and for those around you. Thank you.